It's going to be one of those
Hello.
days, Michelle.
Oh my gosh.
Welcome,
Hey.
everybody. This is Talking Train, TSG Live Talking Trains with V and Michelle, or Michelle first, and then me.
And I just
Today's,
lost all my volume, John.
oh, really?
Yeah, let me try this. I have no idea. We're having serious technical issues, everybody. I'm super sorry. I think I can make it work.
I think it wouldn't be one of our shows if we didn't have a little bit of this kind of technical fiasco going on.
Yeah.
So why don't I try to do a little intro here while you're getting your and stuff.
I have no idea what to
out.
do. I have my volume maxed out.
Oh, well,
that's okay. We'll figure it out.
Let's try this. Hi, I'm John. It's February 16th, and it sure is a nice day here in the Bay Area. I understand it's very cold where Michelle is, and we have a lot to cover in this show because we have a special guest, which we'll bring him in here in a couple minutes. But we also have, Michelle, you've been doing, again, more stuff. Like, do you ever not travel? And it looks like you have someone with you.
I have a guest with me.
Background.
Somebody's already asking, who's in Michelle's room? Sorry. I can totally see you. Just come over here. This is Jennifer.
I was turning off the space heater.
She's here at my house toniday.
Hi, Jennifer.
So I had her come down here and sit with me. But I can't hear you, so I'm probably going to have to put headphones on, and then she can't hear you guys.
Oh, well, she could just sit back there and smile and laugh.
She was helping me with my computer issues. She ran and got my other laptop, and we were trying all that stuff. So hi, everybody. He has a beautiful day in the Bay Area, and we have 5 inches of snow.
Oh, well, you're welcome to it.
Yeah.
I'm glad it's not here. Although we could use the moisture, tell you what. So one of the things that we're going to talk about today is something that you did a bit of on one of your recent trips. And before we get to that, I do want to mention, in case anybody who watches this show isn't subscribed to the channel, and this is the only show they watch on the channel, something really cool happened, Michelle, between the last time we were on and this time.
Okay.
Which was the channel went over 50,000 subscribers.
Oh, that's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you. It happened last month, and I was really surprised because last year when I was looking at the numbers and kind of doing my own trajectory, estimation on it, I was thinking April at the soonest. And then something happened over the holidays where the channel just went bananas, and I don't know what it was. I mean, just suddenly there were people sitting at home watching 3 times more than usual. And so we added something like 2,000 subscribers in a month, which is unheard of for this channel. So it was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
I thought so. So back to the other subject. We're going to have someone on today that you've seen on the channel before. I believe he was on one of the Crew Lounge panel discussions once or twice. I honestly don't remember. But then we just had his layout tour come out this past weekend.
Yeah, I did watch it. It was really interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
People know Jim from various articles over the past couple, several decades, and he's very active in the layout design SIG and the operations SIG. He's the co-author of this book, which is the OPSIG book about operations. He has his own segment in this book, so it's pretty cool. And I will bring him on in a second, but I wanted to ask you, Michelle, because sometime in one of your recent trips, you did some operations and you got really excited about it. And you're like, hey, we should talk about operations next month, right?
I was super curious, and I've done a ton of research since then too, because I'd never done either one of those 2 kinds of operations that I did. It is so different than what we do at the museum. So I'm like, that's what we're talking about next month, operations. So,
very cool.
Yeah.
Well, I'm being told in our chat that
Did it get better?
People are hearing me echo in your speakers. So can you try your headphones?
Did it get better, everybody? Because I was trying out the new speaker I bought, so I didn't have to wear headphones. But did it get better? Do you still hear an echo?
Oh, I think they have to hear me talk for that to know. So anyway, well, I'll keep an eye on the chat, but I want to, if it's okay, why don't you
I
talk?
think it was
Brandon,
my.
Brandon says it's better.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay.
So if there are any problems, just put something in the chat and I'll keep my eyes on that. So do you want to say something about some of the operations that you did before we bring Jim on, or should I just bring him on?
We can bring him on and we'll just talk through it because the way he does it is completely different, I think, than the other two that I did.
Okay, well, let's bring Jim on.
So,
everybody, get ready with your applause. Here he is. Good afternoon, Jim.
Well, hello, John. I don't hear any applause. Come on.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, thank you.
And with the echo, it sounds like there's two of me. So welcome, Jim. This is Jim Providenza. I've known Jim now for probably, 4 or 5 years. I met Jim at the Layout Design and Operations Weekend a few years ago in Petaluma, but I'd been hearing about him for a long time before that. I remember telling you when I met you, like, oh, you're Jim. I knew who you were as soon as I saw you. So welcome. And yeah.
It's good to be here.
John told me when I said I want to do ops, he goes, I know who we're having on the show. Like that fast. Jim, we're having Jim. And I'm like, okay.
Having Jim. Well, I'm happy to be here, and I'm sure we'll have a great time. But Michelle, you said that in looking at the layout tour of the Santa Cruz Northern, that it was very different, not just of course from what you do at the museum, but from what else you've experienced. Is that because it's timetable and train order operations? Or,
yeah, it is. And that you described it as agent operator in the video. And so I'm guessing timetable and train orders, right? So what I did was a track warrant dispatched, and I also did a car cards operating. And at the museum we dispatch, but our yards are dark to our dispatcher. So then you're kind of just on your own in your yards, and we don't do cards.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Different.
Well, and realize that you're talking two very different things between authority and car movement.
Right.
Okay. Authority is track warrants, train orders, centralized traffic control, DTC, whereas car movement is how we understand where this car that we've got here in the yard is going to go, who's the customer, and whether it's car cards or a switch list or computer generated. There's a number of different schemes for doing that, and you just have to keep in mind that they're two different beasts. They do two different parts of things. But yeah, this is Santa Cruz Northern is well, let me back up. As far as I'm concerned, even though I'm doing timetable and train order operations, track warrants is God's gift to model railroaders who want to operate prototypically. It really is. It is so simple to use. It's so simple to understand. And it is very easy to implement very quickly. My friend Bill Kaufman and I visited Richard and Bonita Lake in St. Louis at the NMRA convention that was there, a dozen years ago now, John, maybe. And
right.
We, they wanted to have an operating session. They didn't know what and how. And so I pulled out the flash drive and we whipped out some track warrants and put together, a dispatcher's train sheet. And they had two neighbors who knew nothing about trains, a couple of model railroaders who had never operated, and a couple of kids. And I think one other guy and within 45 minutes, we created everything, taught them how to use it, and operated for 4 hours in a prototypical fashion. It was that easy. Got to have radios. But other than that, it really is just a wonderful thing for if you want to use and do operations. So I fell into train orders because I find it fascinating.
I think it's interesting. I was having a hard time wrapping my head around the difference between track warrants and train orders for a while. I think I finally get it, but that one was a little bit harder for me. I think I understand track warrants are more time. Like you have this warrant until it expires, and no one's going to bother you in that protection of time. But train orders are a little different than that, right? Because they're not timed. They're, I don't know. Can you explain it better?
Well, we can hold an entire clinic on timetable train order operations. John, maybe at some point we can do that one too. It's the biggest difference is that any sort of authority scheme, okay, or way of doing things outside of timetable and train order is controlled by the dispatcher. And the dispatcher says, go and you go, don't go, you don't go over here and you go over here. Red light, green light, and there's different things, but the centralized traffic control, which the dispatcher controls the signals and the switches, is really, in essence, not particularly different from direct traffic control or track warrants, because you're given a set of instructions and you go and you do and you report back. Timetable and train order, much, much, much different in the sense that it is the crew, the engineer and the conductor, who have the responsibility to determine whether they can move. Okay, they get authority to move, but they have a schedule and a timetable that they have to pay attention to for first class or second class trains. If they're an extra, they're created as an extra, and they're at the bottom of the food chain, and they have to weave their way between these other trains that are out on the railroad. So it adds a lot more play value, I think, if you want to do that.
Or stress for me, because I'll be like, ah!
I have a question. Would it be fair, Jim, to say that timetable and train order is more of a ranking system and the other is more of a permission system, where the authority is given based on whatever's happening right now and not based on, who's expected to come at any given time? Does that make sense?
It's a pretty good way of putting it, John. And realize that, and Michelle, this goes back to, in history, timetables existed since the beginning of railroads, but for 20 or 25 years, it was a very inflexible thing because nobody had a way to modify them. If a train broke down and couldn't move, everybody stopped.
Okay.
And then they developed, over a period of time, using telegraph, the ability to send train orders to modify the schedule and then create extra trains. And so you have this, and that lasted until in most American railroading, to the mid 1980s. Still a few places hanging around that do it in prototype railroading, but it was based on the fact that you couldn't have instantaneous communication. And the moment you were able to do that with centralized traffic control, signals and switches, and then later with radio, you develop track warrants and direct traffic control. And so it's, partly it's a historical thing.
That makes sense. And it's almost like protection happened at that point where someone else is protecting your train more than your crew is protecting your train.
Yes. Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Interesting that thinking about that through time, but I guess I've seen a lot of those old videos where the guy gets his train orders, and I don't know if they're Pintrex videos or whatever, and then they telegraph it out.
Well, you come out to the center.
They hoop them up, right? And then the train goes by and gets them off the hoop.
Yeah, you hoop them up. Yeah.
Does anybody do that in modeling? Like actually have like a hoop you gotta go?
In some places, at the La Mesa Club down in San Diego, one of the train order operators is all the way across a 17 or 18 track yard. And so when he has orders to give to a train crew, he actually puts them on a hoop and holds it out over the yard.
There you go.
Pull them off the hoop.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So somebody does it.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So in the video, you were showing how you send your messages and, your agent and your operator, kind of how they communicated. I thought that was interesting. Do you have any pictures of that or anything like loaded up at all?
Oh, no, I don't.
We got a great shot of Paul inside the helix, though, on the video.
Yeah, you did. I noticed that camera angle from like inside.
That was really difficult to get to. I actually used my phone on the track, looking through an empty space in the benchwork, trying to look up at Paul. That was great.
Oh, that's funny.
Man. Yeah.
I'm gonna scroll just a little bit and say, in your video, you did a scene where you used your helix in a way that you moved it back so that you had a scene on the front side of it.
Yes.
I thought that was kind of brilliant. So,
well, thank you.
so if nobody's watched your video yet, you need to go watch it because it's really cool what he did with his helix, and I've never seen anybody do that. Usually it's just the helix is behind the wall over here.
Yeah, it's usually inside a mountain or something, right? Or behind some scenery.
Yeah. That is the only original design thought that I have ever had. Yeah.
Well, you had one. So
I have, how would Seth Newman put it? We're going to leverage best practices. A nice way of saying plagiarize like mad.
Yeah. Well, but though, if you think about it, a good idea is a good idea. And if you were to see a good idea and have an application for it and not use it, that's just being stupid. You know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't mean to sound crude about it, but, people don't, generally speaking, people don't care if you copy them, especially if it's a good idea. They're like, hey, I'm glad I could help you.
No.
Right.
There's any number of people, and there's different ways of working with a helix. But that herniated helix, which Mike O'Brien, another member of the Lab Science, coined the term when he first saw it. He said, "Oh, it looks like you've got a hernia in that helix. It's a herniated helix."
Okay, I can't say I'm a fan of that term.
It does sound kind of weird, doesn't it?
Well, but you get the idea at least, right? It's and it is very effective. It does work really well. And thank you, Michelle.
Oh, you're welcome. I was hoping we had so many technical difficulties before we started. I did not get my picture downloaded, I guess. So I did a track warrant system with a switch list and a remote dispatcher across the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
And so we used basically a radio on our cell phone. We had to press it while you talked, just like a walkie-talkie, to our dispatcher, and then he would call back and we'd fill out the track warrant. And so then I knew I had X amount of time to do what he told me to do. And then when I got to the end, I also had to follow the orders on the track warrant, whether it's wait, call, whatever I was supposed to do.
Right.
So that was a different way for me to operate. I actually liked that one, I think, the best. I think I really liked that.
Well, I really think that track warrants are just absolutely marvelous. Yeah.
And the cars in there were all just in a switch list. And so with color, they were color coded too. It was really handy. So I could be like, oh, a brown car, brown square, or a white one or yellow. So that was really handy. And then I went to the car card layout and I was completely lost.
Well, car cards are just, they simulate waybills, which are, if you stop and think you get a package from FedEx, right? And it's got that sheet of paper attached to it and it says this and that. And sometimes it has a piece of paper stuck inside that gets even more formal. And that's, the same sort of thing that railroads were doing and trucking companies were doing and everybody's been doing for 150 years. It's a bill for moving a car or a truck or a load or a box or whatever it is. And the switch list is a way of just taking the basic information you need. I don't care what's in this. I don't care where it came. I don't care. I just want to know, here's the car, here's the number, here's where it's going, and this is what I do with it, or I'm supposed to pick it up. And so it strips it down to a much easier way to work with it. And sometimes if you've got 40 or 50 cars, even 20 cars, it's well worth it to sit down, take those car cards / waybills and write a switch list so that you've got just the information you need. And then you put those waybills alone, and they sit off to the side, which is what they would do in the real environment in a caboose. You don't take those out onto the ground while you're out there in the mud and the snow or the heat and the sand dust storm. Because these are legal documents. Okay, so you don't mess with them. And you don't lose them. You don't get them dirty. You don't, they still get messed up and dirty, but but switch lists, fold, spindle, mutilate, use them for something else. Doesn't matter.
Okay. That makes sense.
They're like a one use instruction, right? Once you're done with it, you're never going to need it again because presumably, especially in real life, in real railroading, chances are that a yard isn't going to see the same piece of equipment rolling stock probably ever, or if it does, it would be a miracle, just based on how many different cars are out and about that do the same thing, right?
Yeah.
So
because they're going to go from yard to yard to yard across America. So for them to come back would be.
Yeah.
So on a modeler's layout, here's a question that I had.
Yeah.
So Jim, how do you put your cars back? How do you start over for an operating session? Do your cars work their way back through like opposite sessions? Or does the hand of God come and move them? Or do you just move them around? Or what do you do?
I used to have a sign that my oldest daughter made that says, "No giant hand action." You can't
the hand of
car
God.
up and move it, right?
Yeah.
Michelle, that really gets into, how you set things up. So if you have like the weigh bill, like car cart and weigh bill, that you sit there and go, what am I supposed to do with this thing? The normal car cart and weigh bill, John, I don't know if you have a video or a photo of one.
Not handy. Do you have any in the slides?
And if give me a minute once we, I can maybe find one.
Okay.
But it has 4 sides to it on the standard weigh bill, and it directs the movement of the car from one session or from one industry to the next, and so that becomes just this kind of revolving thing. And so the only thing
go full and come back empty, right?
Yes, and it's an empty car. It's now going to go someplace. It'll sit here and wait for a bit. Then it's going to be a load. Then it's going to go to the next place it's listed. And once you set that up, it is kind of self-perpetuating. And then it's only a question of, have you set it up correctly? And do you want to always see the same car showing up the same place? No, after it runs through a whole cycle, then you take it out, you put a different boxcar card in that, information slot, with the weigh bill. And so now the next car will be going to the lumber yard, from the lumber yard out to, distributor, or coming to the cement plant.
Okay.
So that really is, there's a fair amount, no matter whether you do it with a computer or you do it, with the physical weigh bills. There's a certain amount of time that's involved in just setting it up, and you end up doing industry lists, and you stop and think about it as an owner. You say, okay, I have Barrel-Ding and Lumber. Okay, it ships to maybe 14 different lumber yards and dealers and things like that. And how many cars does it need, and of what sort, and how often do they show up, and how soon do they get turned around? If it's, the Del Monte, canning plant, how long does a refrigerator car sit there before it's emptied or loaded? How fast does it turn around? And so you start and try and think about these things. You try and read up about it, and you go on and say, okay, now I've created this list, and it tells me I need these many cars, and I need them to go in this sort of a fashion. And you create the weigh bills, or the computer does it for you, and you've entered it into, one of the computer switch, systems, and off you go. So,
so a whole lot of work on the front end of that.
Well, on the front end, and but I think there's other systems that are simpler if you want. Sometimes you can just work in a smaller railroad. I wouldn't want to do it even on the Santa Cruz Northern, where you can just create switch lists every time you want to operate. And so you just walk around the railroad and you say, well, this car is going to move, and this car is going to move, and these cars are going to get picked up. And that just means that you've moved the work to a different part of your life. Instead of having it done
a little more often.
And
okay.
So when I get ready between operating sessions, and I have another one coming up in a month, first one in almost 2.5 years, it's like, oh my God, I will go through and I will check all of the trains that have moved. I will look at the, weigh bills, see if they need to be turned. And, if a train has reached the end of its run, well, then every car in there, a couple of cars I'll take off and I'll replace them with other cars, because we should have some changes. And I have more cars than I need. So don't laugh so much, John. That's not
you can never have too many cars.
And too many locomotives.
You just might have too many on the layout.
Well, no, that's a different issue, you know. I write a quarterly column for the Pacific Coast Region's branch line, and one of my columns a couple of years ago was entitled Decimation. And I literally went through, and every 10th car went off the railroad because they just, they're like, cats. They multiply at night, right? And all of a sudden you've got chock full of cars. So I just get rid of 10% of the cars, right?
We actually just did that at the Colorado Model Railroad Museum. We just got rid of hundreds of cars because we had too many. And you'd open one of the drawers of cars and it was all log cars. And nobody's going to build a log train with their personal locomotives, And so we cleaned out a whole bunch of stuff and sold it all in our gift shop. So I get that. I agreed to let him do it because I was the one who's like, no, we need all the cars. We need to keep the cars. We might need them. We should keep them.
Might need those cars.
And they convinced me that we should actually get rid of some of them. So we did.
Yeah.
One of the tricks to not acquiring so many cars to begin with is to be strictly adhering to a prototype and era, and have your era be very narrow so that you don't, oh, that's a cool car. I wouldn't be in this layout because, I don't need that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but you can still buy stuff to collect it though. That's the real trap. So.
So does anybody have a layout where for an operating session, they actually they literally go and move it all back themselves before it starts? I imagine there is, right?
Oh, some people do that.
Yeah.
This seems like a lot of work.
And over time on my layout, I've changed how things are done. Okay. But part of trying to restage to where it all starts exactly the same again, that's a tremendous amount of work.
Yeah.
You don't have to do. And it used to be that I would reset the railroad so that it started at 6 o'clock in the morning every time we started an operating session. And so I had to set up some trains and move some trains if they didn't get moved during the previous operating session. And I've since gone to, we stop. And next operating session, you pull out the paperwork, you check the fast clocks, you look at the trains, and that's where we start. And
Okay, now that's interesting.
So
you never know what time of day you're starting. You're just
but you have
continuing.
we have the documentation, so
Right.
and so we know if we want, and it actually theoretically makes it easier because I don't have to restage quite as many trains.
Right, and it makes it different every time you do it.
Yes.
There's an interesting comment that came on. I'm going to bring it up on the screen here. Trevor is a friend of mine, and he has a garden railroad in Santa Cruz. And they don't keep their equipment outside. So they have to set up every time they're going to operate anything. So it's a little different. I mean, I know there are other people that operate on garden layouts. I don't know if you've been there, Jim, but there's a great guy out here. I did a layout tour of this layout too. It's called the Mystic Mountain. It's a big garden scale layout that was built. Really, it was expanded for operations. It's owned by a guy named Ray Turner. And I'm not sure, I never really asked him how he determines where to put stuff, but he uses JMRI to generate switch lists. And then he just kind of looks them over to make sure that it looks legit. Like this job won't take only 5 minutes and that job's going to take 3 hours because of, where the computer told them to put stuff. But I thought that was an interesting comment in the comments there. Right? Because
we have a garden railroad here that switches, but they have staging inside, so everything stays staged. Right. And then they go out and they do all their jobs and stuff and then bring it back to the house.
I think the point I'm trying to make is you have to adapt to the layout and do whatever makes, whatever's appropriate for your situation, right? I mean, there's no one way to do it that's the best for every possible situation.
Well, we're a good example of that. I remember I didn't know a lot about the railroad 10 years ago when I first started at the museum. I didn't really understand operations very well or anything, but I remember there was one of the volunteers came in and actually wrote cards for the cars and set up like everything on the layout that was out was part of the operating session. And I remember that they were saying, I didn't stay. I remember when it started at like 5 p.m. and I guess they left at almost 2 a.m. and they said, never again. And so now when we switch stuff, it's 4 box cars for 4 box cars or 3 tanks for 3 tanks, or go pick up so many of this type of car, because we have 3,000 cars.
Right.
And so, it gets a little crazy. And so now it's just type of car. If you're running a train that switches, or if you're doing an origination in a yard, it's truly just. So we had to adapt, because otherwise you'd be there all night trying to finish.
Sure. Yeah. I mentioned the La Mesa Club before when we were talking about hooping up orders. And, they have a different sort of an issue in one sense, is that when they get done after a 3-day operating session, they have to put everything away from the operating sessions, and then they bring out all of the show trains. They run 360 something days a year.
Mm-hmm.
But they keep track of all this so that in the next month or 3 months, everything comes out and a group of people show up from all over the place to help restage the railroad just the way it was when things ended. But it's a huge operation, and
that's a huge record keeping too.
But that's to some extent it's a little bit easier because of their incredible focus on just modeling a very specific railroad, doing very specific stuff, and so they have a very focused mission.
In case anybody's interested in seeing that, I did a layout tour down there too.
Yes, you did.
I've actually visited the La Mesa Club. It was really neat, except I was there on just like a random Thursday or something. So it was basically just those show trains going through. There were about 2 people back there running a couple of trains. And so I didn't get to see it operate. I bet it's pretty cool.
I bet their display days are probably pretty similar to what you do at the Colorado Model Railroad Museum, I would guess.
I would think it is. And depending on how many people they had here, just like us, the more people you have, the more trains you have out. Although we have a computer program that I don't think they do that will run 9 trains. So we can always have 9 out. Right.
Something else that's different about La Mesa is, as I recall, it is strictly point to point. I don't think there's any return loop down to the bottom, so they can't just run them in a circle like you can at the CMRM. The Colorado Model Railroad Museum has...
Actually, John, they're well hidden, but they do have return loops and massive amounts of staging that are not seen by the general public.
So when it gets out to the Tehachapi Loop, does it just go under the layout then? Because that's kind of the end of the layout.
Tehachapi is not the end of the layout. That's when you continue. Michelle, on when you were there.
Yeah.
But they've now extended it. If you can visualize, you're looking at Tehachapi Loop. It's on the right-hand side as you're in the aisle. Well, they extended it to the left.
Oh.
And in that whole area, there's probably 3 levels of operating railroad, including a massive amount of staging and return loops. John, going out when you get down to the bottom, and if this is not, you should look at John's video, which I have seen, with Jason Hill narrating, and when you get down to the end of the railroad at Bakersfield, the tracks continue and go into a part of the underneath the rest of the railroad that the general public just doesn't see.
Right, that's right. I was thinking of how do they get from Bakersfield back to, to the top, and it's not. It's a loop to loop really, because they have. Sorry, I know that there's a return loop, but I was not calling it the right thing. I was thinking of, because at the Colorado Model Railroad Museum, it's a really long run, and where the train basically ends up is where it started, because it comes in to the other end of the staging yard, facing the same direction. Right, it's facing the same direction, so it automatically stages itself for the next time. Whereas at La Mesa, they can't really do that because, it would be. They can run all the way to the end, which is at the top, but if it turns the train around and comes back down to Bakersfield, it's facing the other direction now. So I guess they could run it on the bottom loop then, huh?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's loop to loop. It's possible.
When I was there, I was in my, look, it's a train stage, and that's all I knew about it. So that's 10 years ago.
Really, at the point that you're at now, then, you want to make arrangements if you can get back there, either during an operating weekend or with somebody from the club who can, give you the grand tour of all the underneath and things like that. But it would really be wonderful to see everything that's involved. I've been operating down there 20 something years, and it's just a phenomenal experience. And they have a whole you end up with a bunch of different people doing different things that you just wouldn't do on a home layout, for example.
And I think I learned scale there too, because I finally saw all the scales in one building.
Yeah.
So
all the other gloves. It's just amazing.
Yeah, it was neat. But I was definitely back then, I was like, oh, it's a train. How nice. I've come a long ways. So
Yeah.
very, very interesting. So they operate in a different way. Do they have a CTC machine? How do they,
They do. And it depends on what era they are choosing to operate, whether they use it or not. And the sessions that I go to are timetable and train order, set in the 1950s.
That's your thing. That's your favorite.
And the dispatcher sits at the same desk. They just don't use the CTC machine, and has 4 agent operators, now 5, I think, and works with them to control the movement of extra trains and to make any changes to the schedule that are needed because something has happened to a train and it's running late. They also like to run 2nd, 3rd, and 4th sections of scheduled trains, which is enough to drive anybody crazy.
We have one random piece in ours. We have a hot box detector.
Oh,
Boulder Creek Engineering ones. And it's tied into our CTC machine. So it'll throw an error on the CTC machine that you have to clear. So you do have to get them out of the way and on a siding. And it takes up a siding because there's no yard nearby. And it's just awful. So I usually don't like that on when I'm dispatching. But I guess it's really fun for some people who like that. It's a puzzle. I mean, it's a problem. It's just throwing one more thing in there to make it interesting and different.
I think we have an interesting short presentation. Should we bring that up, Jim? You want to go through those slides?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Okay. That should be the first slide, right?
Yeah. And this, what this is, the reason I asked, this is from the clinic that I put on. And the next time I give it, it'll be the 28th anniversary edition. So this clinic has been modified and changed over the years, but I've been giving it a long time. The first time was at an NMRA National Convention, and people saying, realistic what? It comes from this series of articles that Rick Kang and I wrote in Rail Model Journal back in the early 1990s.
Now, Rick Kang is a retired dispatcher, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
Yeah.
So you were cutting edge back in your day of operations.
Pardon?
You were ahead of the curve, like cutting edge modern operations.
Well,
modern modeling for old style operations.
Yeah, that way. On the other hand, John, bring up the first of the other slides, and I think this is important point to make because we start getting into this esoteric stuff and timetable and train orders and all this, and hey, I still need that T-shirt. I still am not out there playing with trains. However you want to describe it, it's
still playing.
Okay. Now on the other level, the Tony Custer's quote, the challenges and rewards of a professional railroader, but without the 2 a.m. wake up call, right? That's 2 different levels. There's others in between. And, this house of model railroading has enough rooms for anybody. So there's no best way. To my way of mind, one of the really key things is that this thing about this is really from an operational standpoint, it's a multiplayer role-playing game. When you get in there and you have a dispatcher and you have conductors and engineers, you're starting to do this role-playing. But it's not, a first-person shooter sort of a game where it's a competition. It's this cooperation, and it's a fascinating thing because historically, working railroaders are blue collar. or the people down there in the trenches, whether they're on a train crew, an engineer or conductor, or fireman, whether they are maintenance away, whether they're bridge and building, signal, whatever, they very, very often, particularly for the train crews, worked without any direct supervision. And they were in charge of incredibly expensive equipment. And, a wrong, decision, a mistake in reading something else, get people killed and millions of dollars worth of damage. But the interaction and the attempt to build a model railroad where people can experience some of this teamwork and interaction and trying to accomplish a goal is, to me, what's become one of the keys of what I do, for operations. So I think
I want to say one thing really quick right here, because you use multiplayer role-playing game. I have like college students or younger kids come through the museum, and I'm trying to just explain dispatching and how each dispatcher can be different. And I usually just say it's the dungeon master, and they'll go, "Oh, I get it. Okay, yeah."
Yeah.
So,
and in CTC, that's actually a pretty good analogy.
Yeah, I use Dungeons and Dragons a lot in explaining model railroading. So there you go.
Well, and Michelle, if you wanted to, you could extend that same dungeon master analogy to, direct traffic control, which is one form. Track warrants, okay, is another. Okay, manual block. All of these things, it's the dispatcher saying, go, stop, take the siding. You have, this amount of time, checkbox 4, work between, and then you repeat back and you go do. And that's the big difference between all of these other ways of granting authority for the movement of trains from timetable and train order.
And then there's the whole thing where the track crew has to work together, just like the players, because a coupler is going to fall off or something's going to derail, and they have to fix all those problems that they encounter along the way. I don't know how to incorporate rolling dice into it, but I'll figure that out one of these days. But,
I know what it is, Michelle. If you make your saving throw, the train doesn't uncouple.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. See, we could actually apply the whole dice thing to this too for your for your yard work or your.
Meanwhile, Jim's down here going, "Oh my goodness, these two are
Sorry,
nerds."
Jim.
No.
Okay, back to Jim's presentation about teamwork, because that's really what it's.
Well, but when I first started doing operations, and when I first designed my model railroad, it was to showcase all the different sorts of trains that you could run on a railroad, and whether it was helper operations or local switching or passenger trains or through freights or drag freights or whatever it was. And then over the last 10 years or so, and in particular, I think that evolved from when I started doing timetable and train order, it was much more to focus on the roles that people play and the work that they do. And then some people go, "Oh my God, now you're talking about paperwork." To some extent, but I did paperwork and reports and big reports and other things my entire working life, and it still hasn't stopped me from enjoying doing some of the paperwork that we do for model railroading. It's a game. John, what's that next slide that we've got there?
Oh, I'm sorry. Let me bring that back up.
That's okay.
Do you want a controller, or do you want me to advance
Oh,
it?
I don't care. You can just.
There you go.
Okay. So, one of the things John and I were talking about beforehand was, well, what are some of the things that, nowadays, unfortunately, we still have to worry about COVID-19. So a big thing is, follow whatever the owner's protocols are. Sometimes that's you have to wear a mask, sometimes even in the railroad. Sometimes it's okay if you're in a group and you're good. But if you come into the house, my wife says, please wear a mask. And you do whatever is required there. Food and drink only where and when it's allowed. Some owners have no problems. Some say nothing in there. Others say, hey, there's shelves. Just keep it on the shelf. Don't put it on the railroad. It's wonderful to volunteer to do things, particularly when the owner and the host is setting up the session, people there, and is, what do you want to do? Well, I'll do whatever you need doing. And if you're experienced enough, you can probably pull that off. If you're brand new to operations, say so. Almost anybody is willing to have you do stuff to learn. And real railroads had apprenticeship programs. Santa Cruz Northern, you come to operate. If you've never operated before, you'll be an engineer on a through train. It'll get you over the railroad. You work with a conductor who knows what's going on. The next train you operate be a little bit more complicated. You may still be, the engineer, but then you become a conductor and you've had enough experience around the railroad. And as you come back and operate more often, you just kind of naturally work towards higher levels. And then, some people say, well, I don't ever want to work in a yard. Oh, okay. I have yard masters. And other people, oh, come on. Let me have that yard. We'll work into it.
Kind of like coal, like it's a through train and I just move on. I'm good with that.
Yeah, and that's it exactly, Michelle. It really is a matter of what you are comfortable with, and probably the worst thing you can do is pretend to be qualified to do a job that you're not qualified to do, because that impacts everybody else's experience for the operating session.
And when I operated with cards the first time, I was the engineer and Speed was the conductor, and we got done in time because he was the conductor and not me. Although I did learn a lot and I would work my way towards that.
Yeah. And that's it exactly. If you're going to an actual operating session and the host sends you paperwork via email, study it. Okay, do that. The next bullet point, I can just hear people going,
Yeah, study. What's this?
Yeah,
This is supposed to be fun, Jim.
If something happens on the Santa Cruz Northern and it's my fault, okay, an equipment failure, people have no problem at all about telling me, which I really need, because if I don't know about it, I can't fix it. But if they've done something, it's like there's definitely silence. I don't want to tell them that I damaged something or I did something or I've done that accidentally, and just say it. Okay.
Yeah, we do this at the museum with our volunteers. We're like, we even have like write-up forms. If you broke it, just write it up and set it aside so we can fix it, because nothing's more annoying than going out, you've got a tour, you're showing your layout to somebody and something's completely broken and you didn't know.
Exactly. And
Could you imagine what would happen on a real railroad if the people messing up a switch or something didn't say something? Just think about that. Right?
And so we tell people, like, it's going to happen.
Yes.
It's a law of thermodynamics, entropy. It's going to happen. Things are going to break. So just tell us. We have the same thing. Yeah.
Well, but people don't want to say that, and it's so important to the owner, and to acknowledge that, hey, a lot of my cars I've done a lot of detail work on. Maybe 15% of my cars have been heavily modified and kit bashed. They're going to get damaged. I know that. It's an operating railroad. It's okay. Just tell me. So
it happens with our controllers too. We use NCE throttles and our guys will drop them. And and NCE is wonderful. We mail them and they fix them and mail them back.
Put them on a lanyard.
Yep.
So, say thank you is the next one. That's a big one at the end of an operating session. And also to the, his or her spouse, the regular crew members or helpers that have been helping you. People go out of their way and they're happy to do this. And people ask me, and I frankly say, the Santa Cruz Northern doesn't run except when you're here to run it. That's what it's here for. So, what's up next, John?
Let me advance this. As I advance this, I do want to mention that I think, Jim, what you do with your layout, and I've seen this with a lot of the layout tours that I've done, a lot of the people I know in our area, is that it appears to me anyway, as someone from the outside who's not part of the operating crew or whatever, that a lot of guys have layouts because they really enjoy they appreciate the enjoyment that it brings to others, to their friends, right? When they come over to operate it, and they like to see the railroad accomplish basically what they built it for. And I think that's something that people don't sometimes think about. Because I mean, there are some people who are like, oh no, I don't want anybody coming over and running my trains because I don't want anything to break. It's a different approach. You're enjoying having people come over because it's more than just the trains to you. It's the entire story that you've built. And I think that's a distinction that's worth mentioning.
Oh, John, you've got that one in one, just like that. There is nothing more fulfilling than to see a dozen people, some of whom who've maybe never operated on the Santa Cruz Northern before, have 4 or 5 hours, maybe 7 hours, depending on the format that we're using, of really good enjoyment and camaraderie, and to think that something that I built with help from people, friends and things, but something that I put together was able to give that much pleasure to people. It's humbling. It's fulfilling, but I think you're absolutely correct, and I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Cool.
Okay.
So this is interesting. We're going to talk about OPSIG, huh?
Why should we talk about? We should talk about OPSIG. So one of the things that always gets asked is, how do I find an operating session? How do I get started with this sort of stuff? So I the instant answer is, well, go to the OPSIG. And then I said, well, okay, what are you actually going to tell them? Well, the answer is, I went to the OPSIG. I'm a member. You got to be a member to get to the calendar. But once you're on the calendar, there's 30-something operating events currently listed as of a couple of days ago around the country over the next year. And that's a tremendous resource. A lot of them are open invitation. So it's not closed. It's coming up. You can send a thing saying, can I get an invite? And, it's a great way to get involved. They have a tremendous amount of resources. We'll talk about another one down the road in a bit.
So I just joined OPSIG.
New
member.
Excellent. Welcome.
I'm hoping there's operations in St. Louis at the National.
There will be.
The poor people there, I'm coming, be warned. But we do have one here called Rocky Ops that happens. Yes. And the museum's been part of it. We're not on this one. That's happening in April this year, though. So if anybody's interested, some fantastic Colorado layouts on Rocky Ops this year.
Oh, that's very good. Very good. Yes. Yeah. The next place to go is your local NMRA division. That can be a little bit uneven depending on the division, depending on the people and the interest. Some are very, very active in operations, but almost any of the divisions, you'll be able to talk to people and find out, okay, who can I contact? I'm interested in operating and getting into an operating group. If you have just a local hobby shop, local modelers, kind of another general resource. But it's, in part, you have to kind of put yourself forward. And it's the willingness to say, well, okay, I will drive a distance if I, get a chance to. But you'll find that people are tremendously welcoming. And there's no question about that.
I'd be surprised even if you couldn't find a carpool from wherever you live to wherever you're going, because people come from pretty far away to indulge in the operations if it's a good layout. So just an idea.
No, I think you're absolutely correct, John. There's no, I would say that for any operating session that I host, I've got at least 2, maybe 3 carpools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that gives people an extended period of time to, anticipate or, critique as they leave.
I can't believe he did it this way, right?
Did you see what happened?
Yeah.
His track maintenance, he hasn't fixed that switch in how long?
Yeah.
Modelers are never critical. I don't know what you're talking about.
Oh yeah. Oh, man. I advanced your slide for you there, Jim.
Yeah. So how do you get help when you get there?
I ask for help right off.
Yeah.
I ask for easy jobs.
Well, and John, that's, Bill Schomburg, who's a retired editor of Railroad Mile Craftsman, good friend, and he was always saying, "Give me a passenger train." Because it'll be a first class train. I can get over the railroad. I can learn the route. Yeah. And the railroads had apprenticeship programs. You didn't start, up, high up on a level of any of the crafts. Okay. You worked up from being a helper to being an apprentice, to being a signalman, to being a signal maintainer, to being and then a signal engineer if you went that far. You didn't become a conductor, you started as a brakeman. But one thing that we have to remember is that I have people who have operated on the Santa Cruz Northern now for 25 years, 3, 4, 5 times a year, maybe. Well, let's see, that's say 100 days, that's 3 months. You're an absolute newbie on a real railroad. You are still the very greenest person and still probably a danger to the rest of the crew. But you work up through that apprenticeship program. If you don't know something, just say so, because people will be happy to explain. Sometimes I get more explanations than you were. Is that yes, Michelle? You're going yes.
Yeah, I like point number 3 too.
Yeah. Yes. There you go. Run it over there. Okay. And again, that goes back to work for a chance to work with a regular crew member. Okay. So. Yeah, I think that's an important part of the whole thing. We have notes that go with, so you have job descriptions, okay? Because you're coming in, you're going to work this, particular train. Well, I really should give you some idea of what's going on. And they're usually a little short blurb, but some of them, the more complicated ones, we not only have management's instructions, but we have the old head notes. The old guard, he's going to tell you what it's really like. And the one for the cementipede is probably one of the best. And it says, when you get up to Santa Cruz, Portland Cement, don't pay any attention to what he says you need to do. Okay. But down there at Mack Street, follow it exactly, because otherwise you're just going to totally mess things up. And now I'm saying do this, and he's saying, well, you don't really need to pay attention to that. And so you have a couple of different ways of looking at things. Bill Kaufman, who wrote that particular one, says his official title should be the purveyor of bad advice. In this case, it is, it was good advice. So
I want to say something real quickly, because you kind of, or the conversation sort of alluded to this earlier, which is if you're new to operations, I think it's a really smart idea to find something that's really geared towards someone with your experience, because someone, for example, might see Bay Rails, or Pro Rail, or one of these invitationals that's like really only the hardcore guys should try to do those, I think, because you might show up and not know enough to even do an over-the-road train that's just from one end to the other. And it could really mess up the session. And you don't want to be the guy that basically presented yourself as an advanced operator and you didn't really know what you were doing, because you'll never get invited anywhere. If you do so, I would think you wouldn't get invited anywhere. Whereas if you come to like our Bay Area Layout Design and Operations weekend, where we have operating sessions that are specifically for new people to get involved for the first time or one of the first times. And I think it's important to know the difference between the two types of events, because like I said, you don't want to be that guy that messes up the whole session because you didn't really know what you were doing. And I think it's worth mentioning.
Plus, that makes everybody's stress level goes up.
It can, yeah.
We just had that Spring Creek, even on our layout, which is pretty simple because we keep it pretty simple. We had 17 trains out, and tensions got a little high because somebody wasn't going fast enough for someone else, and they were waiting too long, and everybody was just like, and I finally was like, guys, we were having fun, right?
And I'm not by my comments, I'm not trying to scare people away or anything, but I am trying to point out that there are different types of events for different levels of experience.
And if you want to be comfortable and have fun, don't go into one over your head.
No,
Right.
and I think the other point to make for that, John, is that on the Santa Cruz Northern, we run the whole gamut. Okay, so we're certainly not a railroad that focuses only on really experienced and fancy operators. And I'm always looking for opportunities to get new people involved, to bring people back to the hobby, to look at getting kids involved, and teenagers, and I think that again, the railroad is structured to have several of those jobs where you can fit in as an apprentice, as somebody who just has never done anything, and get the experience and not have the pressure.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we run 14 trains in 4 or 5 or 6 hours, so it's not a real high pressure railroad with a whole bunch of trains all over the place. The pressure tends to be because there's a lot of thinking involved, and you have to pay attention to what you want to do. And so if you've got somebody who's experienced to handle that sort of stuff, you can concentrate on learning the railroad, learning how to control the thing, and things like that. So there was a question in the chat, John, about I answer some Q&A, and certainly.
Yeah, I think we can make some time for that. Let me get the last slide that we have here, and we'll go to Q&A after that. So everybody get your questions ready, or if you want, you can use this call-in feature that we have. There's a link in the video description if you want to call in. Just make sure that you meet all the requirements that are also listed in that description. Please proceed, sir.
Oh, well, resources. So again, back to the OPSIG, they've got a bibliography that lists 12 books and 300 articles, and it's broken down by category for different operational questions that you may have and things you may want to learn about. Some of it is pretty intense. Some of it is geared towards, hey, you want to know how to do this? Let's, dip our toes into the water and see how it goes. Kalmbach Media's books by Tony Custer, and there's one or two as well by Andy Sprandio, and also several MR special issues on operations, which are very accessible and very good teaching tools. There's 4 things that I will recommend to anybody. The first 2 always: Track Planning for Realistic Operations by John Armstrong. It's now in its 3rd edition. And then the V&O Story by Alan McClellan, which you'll have to get used. But it's just that series of articles that became a book really changed the direction of model railroading at a certain pivotal point when things just started to happen and Alan brought it all together and published stuff, and we've never looked back from that standpoint. Very different. The OPSIG, John, you've already mentioned the compendium. And then if you're into timetable and train order operations, the OPSIG also published 19 East Copy 3, and a very, very good resource. It's in terms of resources, trying to reach out to the younger generation who don't necessarily go instantly to books. And so my wife and my daughter have said, you need to get out there on Instagram, and I said, well, Tony Thompson has his blog. Yeah, well, that's a blog. That's not Instagram. You need to get out on Instagram.
I want a timetable and train order TikTok, please.
Pardon?
Do you know what a TikTok is? It's like the new thing.
Yes.
Video. Yeah, you could make TikToks of how to do it.
But I'm dipping my toe into Instagram.
Okay.
And so far, it's mostly looking at some modeling that I'm currently doing. And if anybody really wants, do you just type it out, John, or just
what's your Instagram? Tell us what it is.
RRJIM_SCN.
Railroad Jim.
RRJIM_SCN.
Yeah, I don't have the. Give me a minute because I have something else open, and I'm trying to navigate. Here, give me a second. Let me just close what I have open. I'm actually multitasking because our top secret producer had to play top secret Uber driver for one of the kids here. So she actually had posted your Instagram address in the comments earlier. And I was trying to get back to it because I knew I could just copy and paste it. But here, why don't you say it again? RR Jim.
RR Jim.
Yeah.
_SCN.
Okay. And this is on Instagram. Okay.
Instagram, yeah.
Jim on.
Trying to get out there on for a guy who's been doing computers for way too long.
As a matter of fact, our friend Sparky just put it up in here too. So
there
someone
he
is on the ball. It's just not me. Oh, all right. So I did put the invitation link if anybody's interested in calling in. All we ask is that you're logged into your computer, number one, on YouTube or your Google account. Number two, you have a quiet space that you can talk from. Number three, your webcam has to be on. And number four, I don't remember number four. So we'll go with those three for now.
You close out YouTube so you don't get an echo.
Thank you. That's helpful. Close YouTube so you don't get an echo. And the other thing is, please make it relevant to this topic. I saw somebody was asking a question in here about how many boosters you need in 1,500 feet or something like that. That's not really what we're talking about. So let's try this. We got our first caller. Shall I bring him up?
Sure.
All right. This is our friend Alvin from Salt Lake City, actually.
Hey, Alvin.
Alvin,
man.
Jim. You better have a good question, Alvin.
Well, I've watched Alvin in on one of your Chasing Trains videos.
That's him, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's okay, Jim. We abuse each other. It's fine. All
One
right.
time I went to an op session and I didn't know what was going on, kind of.
Oh.
And it ended up not disastrous, but it wasn't good. So I had the task of doing this little yard thing. Sorry, I don't really have a question. I just called and didn't expect to be on. But I was in this yard, and then I had a sheet to do work. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Switch list.
And the guy was, that's the one. And it had all these cars, and it said move this and move that. And I was like, what do I do if it's not on there? And everyone's like, don't do anything with it. And I was like, okay, I'll just put it in my yard. A huge mistake. My yard got way too full. But like I was sure to keep the cards with the train on the thing where it goes, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
So that guy never invited me again. I don't know if he'd stopped having op sessions or something, but
it could have been COVID related and not Alvin related.
Maybe.
Alvin, that sounds like an excellent description of, asking you to do a job without giving you enough training or information to make it enjoyable for you. Okay. And so because that's important. If all I do is bring people in and yell and scream at them because they aren't doing the job, and I haven't given them the training or showed them how to do, or what sort of a host am I? Or what sort of a person am I, for that matter? It makes a difference. So I think, the unicycle, yes.
The unicycle, yeah.
I'm sorry that happened to you. That's really too bad. Hopefully you'll keep coming back for operating sessions.
Yeah, hopefully. Now at the end I realized, I just leave it. Just leave it there. So at the end, when I was at the bottom of my list and my yard was full, I realized, I just leave this one here. So I had to move stuff around to get that one out and put everything back.
I have a question from chat. Sorry, I'm reading something in chat that's not making sense to me. They're saying that if somebody new on their layout, new to ops, they make them a brakeman.
Yeah.
But what does the brakeman do? You have the engineer and the conductor. What does the brakeman do in an ops session?
Well, Michelle, it depends on how you structure your operating sessions, because what that means is if you have an engineer and conductor, then you add a third crew member, and he is basically understudying the conductor's work, and he'll be throwing switches and uncoupling cars, and I have both a
And
dog.
we were laughing
I
because
just
the door
noticed.
opened and all your animals just came
Yeah,
into your room.
that's because they think it's time to eat. I think I'm talk to Terry.
How
You're
cute.
10 minutes late on the food.
Well,
there,
you know,
Jim.
Wait, I'm sorry. You know, but these are the, I don't know, you can't see the black cat, but
He went back out.
yeah. Well, Radley, the golden retriever, is a breeder for guide dogs.
Nice.
Oh my gosh.
He's a
I
pretty.
love golden retrievers.
In fact, he got credit from John and Sydney on the video.
Yeah, we had a special thanks to Radley. Well, he hung out with us the whole time, and he was a good boy. So
Yeah.
That's awesome.
So I want to mention something for people. Are you going to go, or you have a question?
I have a question. What was
Oh.
your Instagram again, Jim?
RRJIM and then underscore SCN.
There he is. Okay, I follow you now.
Oh,
Okay.
thank you. I'm in trouble again.
Yeah.
I'll find you later too. I have a random question.
Yes, go ahead.
These things pop in my head. Okay, so if you have car cards and you pull a car off the layout, do you keep the card with the car, or do they like go in a separate file, or do people like keep the card with the car?
It depends on what I'm doing with it, Michelle. If it's gone off for maintenance, it stays with the car because it's going to come back onto the railroad. It'll go into the yard at the rip track where it has theoretically been repaired.
Repair in place, right, or something
Repair in
like that.
place, yeah.
Okay, I asked that question not
Now
too long ago from somebody.
Yep. Now it has to continue on its journey. If it's a car that I'm cycling off the railroad because it's had its time for a while, then no. The car cards. It depends because I'm changing, and this is getting a little bit esoteric. The standard fork cycle waybill with the tan envelope. That envelope stays with the car. It goes into a box and it stays there, so I can find the envelope again in the future.
Okay.
The
I was just curious what people.
car card, which the waybill, which talks about the movement, gets put into a little file box and it'll get reused with another. And I'm moving towards the more prototypical format waybills that Tony Thompson and Ted Pamperin have championed for the last 8 or 10 years. And those stay with the car because they're very car specific.
Okay.
Regardless of what happens to them.
We have another person waiting to get in. Do you have another question, Alvin, or was that it?
No.
Okay, we'll put
Hi,
you back.
Alvin.
I'll be good to
We'll
go.
put you back in the basement and bring up our next
Alvin, great to
caller.
meet you.
Great
Yeah.
to meet you on the internet. I'll follow you.
Maybe
I've already followed you on the gram.
Thank you so much.
You're
Cool.
welcome.
All right,
We'll
Alvin.
see you in the
Hi,
future.
Talk to you soon.
Okay.
Maybe next time Alvin comes out, I'll bring him over to check out your layout, Jim. That could be fun.
Absolutely. We'll put a throttle in his hand.
He would love that. Everywhere I've gone so far, except for one layout that we took him to where he didn't get a layout. Everybody else is just handing him layouts. Throttles. I'm like, hey, how come I never got one?
That's me.
Anyway.
I went to Texas to operate on a home layout for the first time because nobody local ever invites me.
Oh, right. Well, they probably figure you have a layout to operate on already at the museum there.
You got a big railroad.
I do.
Yeah.
Hello, Jason.
Hey, Jim. Hey, John. Hey,
Hi,
Michelle. How's
Jason.
it going?
Hey. Good.
I thought I'd drop in at least and say hi.
Yeah.
But interesting discussions with the people talking about new experiences on layouts and things. And I was just kind of reminiscing of my first time on Jim's layout, and then the second time, and then the third time, and the first few times I was doing stuff at Pro Rails and Bay Rails, and my time down at La Mesa learning the system, and then thinking from the more experienced side of operations at La Mesa back towards the new people coming in and experiencing the layout for the first time, and throwing people out there like John and having them run around the layout, and then during the op sessions and things. And then as we learn as we learn as we see them learn how the layout is and how it works, then the experienced people are kind of looking back at them going, yeah, he's getting it. No, this person's not quite got it. We need to keep them with a pilot for another couple trips, and they should be getting the hang of it. And the people that are getting the hang of it, we bump them off and we'll send them out solo and see how they do on that. And then they learn into more experienced jobs.
Yeah. Jason, something that I know both John and I have talked about, and I don't know for you personally, did you start off as one of the kids at La Mesa?
I was 16 when I joined.
Yeah.
But my history goes back to years and years before that. And I watched your video, John, or Jim. Good grief, I'm tripping over myself today. I watched your video on your layout, Jim, where you were talking about how to operate a model railroad and so forth. And I was reading those books from, 6, 8 years old, probably 10, and started doing stuff on my home layout by the time I was 10, 12, 14. So by the time I joined La Mesa at 16, I was kind of in the idea of where things were, and I was actually reading some of Jim's articles even at that point. How to block switching lists, block Santa Cruz Mac Street Yard. I remember those. And that was actually some of the stuff I did for La Mesa with the block list and stuff. I was using Jim's information. But yeah, that you kind of learn a little bit on that kind of stuff ahead of time. But then we did the big push for, I think we were doing 4 to 6 hour sessions. And then we led up to that ProRail, Jim, in 1998.
Mm-hmm.
That you came to, and you and Seth, I think, were the two people, and I got assigned to work with you guys, keep an eye on you, and I basically got turned into the clerk or foreman or somebody to work under you guys, and only a few years later did we realize, hey, wait a minute, it was you guys that I was working with that time. If I had realized when I was 18 that it was you guys, I probably would have been a little bit more awestruck, but you guys are so humble about it.
Probably just as well that you weren't, Jason.
Yeah.
One of the things I wanted to point out, and why I asked, when you started, because John and I have talked about a bit, and Michelle, I suspect you deal with this a lot, is, and La Mesa has always made a point of encouraging teenage members to join and learn and become part of the crew. And to the point, Jason, where now you run the operating sessions quite often.
Not so much since the last couple of years, as I've not gotten down to San Diego, and my phase of life is a little bit different right now. But yeah, for let's see, I joined at 16, and I learned the ropes for a couple of years, and then they sucked me into helping set up the op sessions by the time I was 17 or 18. And let's see, when was ProRail of that would have been spring of '98? Does that sound right?
Yeah.
So I would have been probably 2 years in or so, and the general manager handed me a packet of paperwork saying, "Here, learn these trains, learn the cars that are supposed to be in the different trains, and help me set this thing up, because we got a big, crazy 24-hour event. It's 4 times bigger than what we've done before. It's going to be crazy." And then we went into, and the layout only stopped at Cliff and cut straight across from Illman to Bena, or not even Bena, Illman to Magundon at that time, and we only had half a Bakersfield yard. It was a much smaller layout than it is now when John took the tour down there. So a run over the layout was only about half an hour track time.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, you learn switch lists, you learn all that kind of stuff. And then from there, just took the deep dive on it. And as I was going to college down at City College in San Diego, only about a mile away, it wasn't too hard to get up to the club before or after school and keep my grades up, and I didn't get in trouble, and go up to the layout and do stuff there. And it was great times. And by 2005, they basically turned me loose on the freight trains and stuff and said, "Here, take care, it's yours, take care of it, make sure things stay straight." And then, of course, over the years, with all the guests coming, we got guests that, like Jim and some of the others, that learned everything, so that oh my goodness, by what, 2012 or so, we were letting you guys take over. You guys were coming in like Thursday nights, Thursday day, and making a long weekend of it, and you guys would take over, and it's the same thing. The information gets passed around enough, and I think for us, what kept it from getting boring was I learned anyway, the best way to make it not become like, so you don't look behind the curtain to see like how the game is set up. You have each person give the next person the job, just like you do in real life. One person doesn't invent their work for the day, unless you're like an artist and you're going to paint something maybe, but you probably have an idea that somebody told you to do something. And so each person in the operating session tells the next person. I think that was one of the big things in our op sessions that developed, where we diversified the management out into the field and had each person work on the steps for the next person in line, and it reduced the overhead management of the whole system a lot.
Yeah.
We actually went through a huge thought process at the museum, because when I first started, you had to be 18 to volunteer, because these are expensive trains. It's a big layout. There's 138 signals. It's super complicated. You got to be 18. Well, then we started finding youth that were really competent, knew what they were doing, operated on their home layouts. And so I put this little clause in there we changed it to 16 so that you can at least drive yourself, because you're there for 6 hours and mom doesn't want to stick around for 6 hours usually. And then we put, or case by case. And I think that's the best thing we ever did, because Chris has been with us for 2 years and he just turned 15, and he's a great operator, and he comes every week. And we've had some other young kids. We had Jack until his grades got bad. And his mom said, until your grades get better. And every time I see him, he's like, I'm working on it. So maybe we're the motivator for his better grades. I don't know. I hope so. But yeah, it's interesting that you would say that, Jason, because we had to change. And I actually, can you bring up my slide picture, John?
Yeah.
Up? This is huge for us. This is Jeff from Spring Creek Model Trains. And this is his son, Joe. You can barely see him. He's kind of tucked away there behind that building. Joe operated the longest train on our layout. You can see the front of it here. It's called the Glowworm. It's 110 cars long. 6 locomotives pulling it. It's one of our more difficult trains, because if you go too fast on the 2% grade, all this stuff. And I walked over in this moment, and Jeff is standing back, and he's going 4 cars, 3, 2, because there's a signal just around the corner, and Joe can't see it real well. And Joe stops it just perfectly. And I was like, Joe, that was super impressive. I said, how old are you? Like 7 or 8? And he goes, I'm 5.
Wow.
He's 5. And he operated probably better than me and a lot of our other people. He was so careful, so focused. He spent an hour focused on his train. I mean, his dad walked around with him, but Joe did it. And I think that proves a lot of things that people say about kids in the hobby not being able to do this.
What it proves is guys like me aren't as smart as a 5-year-old.
I know. I was like, Joe completely did that on his own. So.
I should probably back up and tell you how I started in the hobby, and not to underestimate children in the hobby. I think the dates are a little bit funky, but my earliest memory of serious steam power on the railroads, prototype railroads, was when my parents took me up to Sacramento Rail Fair, and I was literally a toddler. And my dad grew up with Pacific steam engines, cab forwards, and GS4s and daylight colors and so forth, and so he was familiar with them. And here was 4449 on the river trackage right there next to the museum in Sacramento. And my dad was holding me at his eye level as 4449 walked along the Embarcadero there, and shooting steam out of the cylinder cocks and plume of steam 70 feet in the air. And I was old enough that I knew what steam was, and because I'd played with pressure cookers and so forth, and I realized, oh, this is going to hurt when this comes by, because I thought it was going to steam scald us. And my dad tried to make sure that I didn't escape, and he actually was able to keep me there. And we stood there next to the engine as it came by. My dad could have reached his hand out and touched the skirts as she came by. And I remember going through the steam plume from the cylinder cocks and seeing the drivers same height as me. And that was, let's just say that left an impression. And then a couple years later, within a year or two, my dad had joined the Del Mar Fairgrounds Club, which ran 2 weeks a year during the summer fair at the Del Mar Fairgrounds. And every Tuesday night and Thursday night, they had running nights and a club night where they showed slides and stuff. We usually went up. So by the time I was 2.5 or 3, I was running trains on that layout with my dad over at Cimarron Station. And that lasted until the layout was torn down in around, 1989, 1990, somewhere in there. And so, I had a pretty early start. And the early start happened with a little N-gauge roundy desk leaf layout. And my folks didn't figure I knew about it. And I guess I got in there, and they, after about 15 minutes, went, "Where's Jason?" And went looking for me. And I'd gotten into the room, figured out how the electric Bachmann, this way, that way throttle worked, and was running the train around when they found me. And they went, "Uh-oh." Well, he hasn't destroyed it, and they're kind of sitting there wondering how this, what? And so then we moved to HO within a year or so. And so probably by the time my dad I remember being on a 4x8 HO scale layout, running a dummy locomotive around myself with my dad running the electric around the outside double track oval. And, so the idea that kids below the age of 3 can't be disciplined and handle themselves with small mechanical stuff, I don't think is necessarily true. It's a case-by-case basis, obviously.
Yeah.
But, I remember one time my dad, somebody had a switch set wrong or something, and the electric train crashed into the hand-powered train that I was pushing. And I got mad and was going to launch an F unit dummy across the room. And my dad grabbed me and said, "No, we're not going to do that, because we're not going to break things." And, it was a teachable moment. And, you realize that if you're starting to train somebody by the time, bad pun. If you're starting to train people by the time they're 2 or 3 years old to be controlled and careful with how they work with things, a lot of the temperamental issues that I think we see in, kids that are getting older, preteens, tweens, teenagers, and so forth. I think a lot of that's reduced because the people learn self-control at a very young age, and that the temper tantrums and throwing toys across the room and stuff just isn't acceptable. So, soapbox, but
No, it's true. And sometimes adults have issues with temper.
I was going to say, I've known 10 and 12-year-olds that I wouldn't let near a layout. So it is definitely what you said, Jason. It's a case-by-case basis. And there are a lot of really, really sharp young kids that can handle it. I've seen 5-year-olds that would be far more competent than the 12-year-olds I was talking about a minute ago, operating trains on a layout. So, I just want to make this point, because I think it's an important point, is to understand which one you're dealing with. And if you have someone who is competent, to let them do it, because that will get people into the hobby. Sorry, Please proceed, sir.
Oh, yeah. And you realize you learn other skills in there too, like some in terms of finance and things like that, wise or maybe not so wise money management. My folks said one time, I think it was probably 1986 or thereabout, they basically, I had an allowance of like $5 a week back then. And the deal that I made with my folks was, if I could save $100, we would, as a family, we would buy a West Side GS4, which was $325 new. And I'm literally 5-6 years old, and basically owner of a brass locomotive. And that engine, Yeah, and I learned by the time I was probably 6 or 8, so within a couple of years, I was lubricating it with Labelle 108, cleaning dropping the gearbox open and cleaning out the gear and making sure that the engine was properly lubricated. I mean, that engine, by the time I joined La Mesa when I was 16 in the mid 90s, it had already had the plating run off its drivers. That engine saw a lot of service, and I still have it. It's still well maintained. I need to do a little bit of work on it and get it re-DCC'd and re-equipped and back in service. But these brass models are an investment for a long time, and I don't think a lot of people realize, with proper care, again, these things that last a lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
And the skills you learn will also last a lifetime.
Yeah,
It's true. There's so much to learn from this hobby. I mean,
So-
it's pretty phenomenal. So.
something else that will last a lifetime, and Jim alluded to this earlier, talking about getting regular operating crews, is your friends will also last a lifetime, because especially if you get a similar group every time, you're all seeing each other, whatever, once a month, whatever it is. You may see each other more than once a month because you might go operate on different layouts together. And it's always about the camaraderie. I've decided in my life that every hobby is really an excuse to hang out with your buddies. If you go fishing, I'm serious. If you go
It's true.
fishing, you're hanging out with your buddies, right? It's like, hey, let's go fishing. You could be just as happy sitting in a park drinking a beer with your friend. Well, if you can drink beer in parks, I don't think you're supposed to do that.
Breaking the law, John.
If you're a railroader, you're in compliance with violating Rule G.
Yeah, well, you know what I'm saying. Anyway, I want to
On your own land, on your own property, next to your own lake, you can.
Yeah, it's not a park in that case. Do you have any other questions or comments, Jason? Because I got someone else waiting to come on.
I was just thinking when you said that, it's friendships and so forth like that, and I'm just remembering back to, I think it was Jim. When was that Bay Rails? 2009 or so that I went up and started joining you guys in the Bay Area.
That sounds about right.
Sounds about right. Yeah, and I had never really gone out to any of the Bay Rails, Pro Rails, or anything like that until then. And Jim, of course, I'd known him for years down at La Mesa, and I always had a wonderful standing invitation to go join the traveling roadshow, shall we say, of operators. Whereas before that, I'd always stayed in the San Diego area at La Mesa. And so when I did that, it was very short notice. It was like, 3 weeks before the event. I mean, I don't remember, Jim. Was registration closed at that point? Even I don't recall, but you guys were able to throw me out to a few layouts. It was not even a choice of layouts. It was, can I please be fit in someplace, just have a good time or whatever, and off we did that. And I think I made every Bay Rails and Pro Rail that you guys held in the Bay Area since then, up until 2019 or so.
That was the last.
Yeah, and I the amazing thing. This is I think I'll be my closing thought. But it's such an amazing thing in the hobby that we meet people from all over the country at these events, and it's definitely a white hat. You're vetted by the people to be at the group, to be invited to the group, and it's an amazing thing to say that I know people probably. At one point, I knew people probably every 4 hours drive around the entire U.S. Or I knew somebody, I'd call Jim and he'd call Zizik or somebody. And then, we had a friend, Ben, who was working to become a Amtrak engineer. And he was back in Delaware at training, and he needed a little bit of time off. And he's like, man, I got to go play on a train layout or something. I got to get out of here, And he's like, do you know anybody back here? And I said, well, I know a couple people. And so I called them. They called another friend, and within 3 hours, he had invitations to 2 or 3 layouts that he could go play on. And likewise, being able to stay at each other's houses. And the model railroading community is amazing in terms of if you're vetted and being allowed to I'm a friend of so-and-so's. Oh, you are? Okay, come on in. My house is your house. Don't fall in the pool and drown. Here, have fun, kind of thing. It's amazing. And the community is so warm and inviting. I think a lot of people don't realize that, and that these relationships do last years. And it's so valuable to be able to know people like Jim and so forth that, we can go all over the country and not see each other for 5 years and run into each other at a hotel room and stuff, or a hotel gathering, and act like we've never been apart.
Better a gathering than a room, Jason. Yes.
Well, whatever. I mean, the Bay Rails group always gets together in that super suite thing that they rent, but whatever. Yeah, and then there's the people that go to the bars and stuff too. There's always that crowd.
Yes, there is.
Anyways, great talking to you guys, and I'm going to get back to real life and work and stuff. So
Thanks
take
for
care.
calling in. Thanks for calling in, Jason.
Yeah.
Bye, Michael.
Jason.
Bye, Jim. Bye, John.
Take care.
Bye. Oh, I want to mention for the viewers who don't know, Jason Hill, that's who that was. He's on the layout tour that we did at the La Mesa Club. That's that massive layout in San Diego. And he did a really great job. And, he's another one of those guys. I've known Jason now for probably 6 or 7 years, something like that. And, he's come over here and done shows about weathering. He's been on the channel a number of times. In case he sounded familiar, that may be why. And the person I was about to bring on disappeared off of our basement backstage area. I'll bring in. I'm sorry. Let me bring in Dave real quick, and we'll see if he has a question for you. Oh, here comes Robert. Let me bring in Robert because he's been waiting the longest. We'll get to you, Dave, next. All right. So, here he comes. Well, hello, Robert. How you
Hello.
Hi, Robert.
Oh, I'm doing fine.
doing? Robert wants to
Nice
talk
hat.
to us. Yeah, he wants to talk to us about the brakeman job. So maybe that'll shed some light on the whole
Okay.
idea of running ops as a brakeman.
Yeah. On the Swamp Creek and Western Railroad, we have some young kids that come in. This layout was a DC layout before it turned DCC, but we have switches all the way around the layout. So the
Can I ask a
brakeman's
question,
job is
Robert?
to,
Can I ask you a question? What's the Swamp Creek and Western?
it's an old club that was formed in 1977, and the layout is called the Port Columbia and Eastern.
Okay.
It's the one that we're being vacated out of the Amtrak station. It's confirmed. So we're
Okay.
looking for a new spot.
I just wanted to make sure what that was before you continued, just to lay out the
Okay.
groundwork.
Yeah.
Please proceed, sir.
So what you have to do is you have to turn your switch ahead of time, your block switch ahead of time. This is DC here. And you had to clear behind. So the only way a person learns the layout is goes ahead and turns on and kills the other one for the other train to come through and all this bit and throw the switches as a brakeman.
And that's
And
what
yes, sometimes when we have the conductor and as the conductor's doing some of his work, he's doing the set outs and pickups, and he's learning the stations of our layout. And when he gets better and better and better, we have what we call a station test to know where the limits are and all this bit and everything like that. And what we're trying to do is teach how railroading are. And me as the chief dispatcher down there, it's really fun to watch this going on. Yes, it gets a little hectic. I mean, yes,
Cool.
John, I got my chief dispatcher's certificate after over 88 hours of dispatching. And the fun part about it is they go along and say, well, who's a good dispatcher? Oh, let's get Bob. Why Bob? Because he works on the railroad.
Right.
Right. So I'm now chief dispatcher. I'm teaching the other guys how to be a dispatcher in this process. And I have come up with a little form. It's called, if you can read it.
Yeah, your
Right
webcam's
there.
not working too well. It's a track warrant?
check mark.
it's a track warrant from the Union Pacific Railroad. And basically we do this, you have the engine, the date, where you're at. Then we have checkbox 2, proceed from 2. Checkbox 4, work between the station that you're going to be going to. And also it says track spot 9, do not foul ahead of what limits you're in. So that's what a track warrant does. And we have several of them. Plus we have what we call, and I made these up for the crews and all that, is, if you can see it, that's our train list, switch list. The conductor has to go and he gets a group of cards. He has to make up a list to carry it and just put the pack of cards in his pocket. And he follows this list. And you have destination, type, empty, load, pickup, or set out. Real simple, real easy. And when we don't have a dispatcher on there, or when we do, and we want to do what we call the switcheroo. And a switcheroo is where guys get groups of cards. They go build up their trains, all that. But when they come on the main line, that's when I go along and give them authority to enter the main line.
As
Just
the
like the real
dispatcher.
railroad, but
Right.
that's as the dispatcher. Or as they call it, the crazy idiot that's over there by the box, that runs the show. Because the dispatcher owns the territory. And I try to explain this to some of these operators. The dispatcher owns the territory. The operators rent it for this certain amount of time. I own the main line. They don't. So it's fun because the switcheroo is really great because the cards are set up where if somebody wants to go down there during the week, they can pull one of the cards out, read it, and go play on the train and leave it like that and put the card at the back. So the next card gets pulled and the next card gets pulled.
Does that sound similar
That's
to
the way
any
it
of
works.
Yeah, does that sound similar, Jim, to any of the layouts you've operated on?
To some extent, John. It's if you have a list of work to do and you're going through it, you can just set up and move a particular set of things, and this one way of setting it up to do that. Yeah.
Very cool. Well,
Yeah,
I
one thing I do is
oh, I was gonna ask
ahead.
you if you had any specific questions that are relatable to that maybe Jim can answer. Because he's actually stayed longer. Originally, I had planned to have Jim on for an hour, and it got good. So, sorry, Jim. I hope you don't have something to do.
In a little while, I think I can hang a little bit longer.
Okay. So, Robert, do you have any questions for Jim? And then I'd like to get to Dave, if that's possible.
Yeah, I watched the video that you did on Jim. I like the way the operation he has set up. My question is on your full-blown tracking time, or do you have a modified tracking time? Like ours is track warrant.
Oh, wow. The connection's really bad.
It really broke up badly.
Yeah. Hey, Robert, can you turn off your webcam?
I froze it up.
If you turn off your webcam, it might work.
Yeah.
There we go. Try it now.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Hello. Well, I mean, you run your track control.
Oh, it wasn't getting any better.
No.
Oh, now he's gone.
Now he's gone. There's a question in chat that's good.
Oh,
Jim can
sorry.
answer.
Is
You
it,
want to put it on?
which one is it? Sorry.
Check warrants for layouts. Do people prefer full size sheet of paper, half sheet, index card? Is there a standard? The little 4-side thing, is that like an industry standard? Did the NMRA set a standard for that?
So and Michelle, you got to separate car movements from train movement authority.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, both of them have paper though. So.
Yes, it's all paper. But whether if you're talking moving cars, you're talking switch lists or car cards and waybills or actual waybills or computer generated. There's also tab on car and thumbtack and several other ways of doing car movement. Okay.
You just added 2 more to my list of what I don't know, but okay, keep going.
We all started off that way. Still plays with trains. Okay. But for track warrants, the standard nowadays, and it's been for quite some time, the Union Pacific one that we saw a little bit of from Robert is 11 inches by, it's probably a half page size, and it's a full 11 inches. And now some track warrants are done full page, 8.5 by 11. I developed a track warrant with Bill Kaufman decades ago when I was doing track warrants. That's a quarter size, so 4 to a page, that has the minimal amount of stuff that you can have on it. And track warrants have changed over the years since they were first introduced by the real railroads and have gotten more extensive. So the little quarter page stuff that I've always used when I do track warrants, I find perfectly acceptable, and it's easier to put on a small clipboard rather than this, big tail of a thing. So does that answer the question? I think
it does. That was good. Yeah, the track warrant I used was like a quarter page, and then my switch list was like half a page but tall.
Yep, that's about right. And then you could easily find, the track warrant would be almost the same size as a switch list, a half page.
Yeah.
I want to bring in another caller if you guys are okay with that.
Yeah.
And this is a friend of ours from Australia. Hello, Rod. How you doing?
Good, guys. How are you?
Hi, Rod. Good
Hello,
to see
Rod.
Hey, Michelle. Hey, Jim. Hey, John. Yeah,
Welcome.
I've been following the discussion on operations. I actually spent some money. I'm hoping this will show up, but does this look
Here.
familiar at all?
It shows up on my screen.
I need to order that.
Yeah.
Should I get my copy, and I'll hold up my copy as well? I mean, we can do that.
Mine cost a bit more than yours, I think, but anyway.
Did you notice, Rod, who the authors are in that book?
Yeah, some guy called Jim.
Well, he's one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it makes a good book stop at the moment, but I will read it. I was just going to say, I've been fascinated with operations because you can have your model railroad, but if you don't operate it, you lose half the fun. Our club here in Perth in Western Australia, we've adopted the STS system, the shipper transport system, I think it is, or transfer system. So it's somewhat computer generated, and we use tablets. We have an operating session this Saturday coming. So we'll be assigned a job, whether we're a through train or a yard, and you actually have to be the dispatcher as well as the engineer. But it's taken a little while for us to learn it, and it's still being refined, the program. Gentleman in the US that's created the program, I think his name's Tom. I can't remember his surname at the moment. It fails me. But the 2 guys in our club are helping, and we've done some wonderful things with it to work it out. But it brings a whole new level of enjoyment to operating the model railroad. And it's great to have that extra aspect. And time just disappears when you're operating properly.
I agree with that. It goes fast when you're operating.
Yeah. And Rod, I think, Rod, you make a good point that adding levels of ways of doing things and interaction with, whether it's in paper or on a computer or however it is, really adds to the enjoyment overall of the of using your railroad.
Well, we have the option of, for those that are older or can't use a tablet, they can still print it out and they take their sheet with them and they work through their job. Others, like I say, if we have the tablet, we can actually create our own jobs once we've finished what has been assigned. So it's different levels of complexity that we're getting into now. And we can regenerate work for ourselves if we've finished the assigned job. So it's great. But you've got to remember that you've got 2 hats on in that situation. You're both the dispatcher, the engineer your everything. So
Oh, very interesting.
yeah, no, it's a good program, and I think as time goes on and it gets refined, it might be ideal for many clubs who perhaps haven't had something set up from the beginning, and that's where we had nothing. We had no car cards, we had no way bills, we had nothing like that. I'm visually impaired, and one of the things that we did, for example, suggested to the gentleman that designed it, is if we could have a photo of the car that we're supposed to pick up, drop off. And that has been absolutely wonderful. I mean, okay, occasionally you get two cars that are very similar, just a different number on them, road number. But if you've got a good eye, you might be able to see the difference in the weathering or something like that. So for a quick reference to see what you've got to pick up or what you've got in your consignment, it's been a real benefit to have that aspect to it as well.
I would love to have a picture on my car cards in the future.
I've operated on a layout that has pictures on all of the car cards, and it is a really big
That
help.
would be nice.
I know I've talked to people who operate N-scale layouts, and that's a real challenge because reading the numbers on the side of an N-scale car without help, a magnifying glass or a visor or one of those things, it's practically impossible. So having a picture on N-scale operating layouts, having a picture of the car is also invaluable. So it's a great tip, I think.
Yeah,
John, you took that tip right out of my mouth.
Oh, about N-scale?
Yeah, and scale and the photograph on the on the car card.
Yeah.
Well, I use my mobile phone, the camera, as a magnifying glass if I can't see a car number. That's the cheat I get around. But yeah, having the photo there to start with to identify the car a lot quicker is brilliant, and you can see what you've got straight away.
Absolutely. Yeah. As long as it's not as long as it's not an identical car, sans the number, right? Because
yeah. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I want to get on. Thank you very much for the past few shows as well. We've discussed operations as well. It's very, very fascinating area, and one I look to as I develop a layout eventually here at home. It'll be things I'll implement. So,
well, Rod, thanks for calling in. It's really good to see you and good to talk to you.
Guys, take care.
Thanks,
Okay.
Rod. We'll
Take
see
care,
you.
Rod.
All right. So are you still okay, Jim? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to keep going, but we were having this great conversation.
I know. Well, I actually do have to get some stuff done, and we have to do some dinner. My wife has a Zoom meeting she has to host. So
So you need to
In
go.
that case-
I need to go pretty quick too. I'm going to actually remote dispatch a layout tonight.
there you go.
We're going to try it. I'm learning.
Well, that'll be wonderful. You should report back. I would look forward
Yeah, I'll
to
have to let you guys know how it goes. I got sent this gigantic spreadsheet. It's kind of terrifying, but we'll see if I can figure it out.
Well, in any case, we'll let you go, Jim. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to take up so much of your time, but
Yes, thank you, Jim. I really enjoyed learning from you tonight. It was a pleasure to meet you.
There's all sorts of other things I'm sure we can talk about, Michelle. That there's,
Yep.
Are you going to get out this way to California anytime soon?
Eventually, I think this summer, maybe.
Oh, well,
Hopefully this summer I get out there.
We'll get an operating session set up.
Okay, I'll come try it. If you're willing to let me add some chaos to your layout, I will try.
Thank you very much for your time, Jim.
Thanks, Jim.
And you're welcome back anytime. If you ever have something you want to talk about, just you know how to get hold of me.
Careful, John. Slippery slope.
All right, man.
Thanks for coming, Jim.
Take care.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, so let's. Do you have time?
I still have a little
your
time. I
yeah,
get
should we
them when
bring
I
up your
get there.
slides, or can I bring up Dave? Because Dave's been waiting.
Bring up Dave. My slides are not important. They were just silly things. So
Well, here's the other slideshow, also known as Dave.
Hi,
Hi,
Michelle.
Dave.
Hi, John.
Hi.
Congrats on 50K, John.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Well, it's really thanks to all the great people that participate and all the viewers. I mean, I say it all the time. I say this all the time, and I know it sounds corny, and I know it sounds like I'm being facetious, but I'm not. When I say that this channel has the best viewers on YouTube, and
of course, it has the best viewers. We're all here.
right? I'm talking about people that see the people that comment on the videos and they add clarity to certain topics, and it's really a lot of fun, and I feel privileged really to be able to do it. I've met a lot of really great people, so I'm excited.
Wonderful. Well, Dave, did you have a question today? Comment? What do you
Yeah,
want?
what's your
I had
question
a question for Jim, but obviously
Oh.
he already
Oh,
left.
sorry.
I'll-
Let me
here-
answer for Jim. We'll see how I do. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, I'll be Jim for a minute, and if I don't know the answer, I'll say I'll check with the real Jim.
Nah, it's good. 'Cause
Yeah, sorry about that, Dave. I asked him to come on for an hour, and he was on here for almost 2, and I feel
Which
kind
is-
of bad now.
Which is fine. I mean, we can always extend the show for a half hour or two, if worst case scenario. You've done it before.
Yeah, but Michelle has somewhere to be, and
I
I'm
have
hungry.
to go too
so.
tonight, so we have to end. I told him I'd be there right after 7.
See, I thought Michelle was going to talk tonight about Amherst and what
I
was
did
going
too.
on there.
I know.
why-
Well, we can do it next time.
Yeah.
I have bring up my slide and show the next picture of my slide deck.
This one?
This is what I have to say about Amherst. When Scale Trains did their presentation, everybody's like, "Oh, there were like 20 people." There were a lot more than 20 people there. It was actually really crowded when they did their announcement, and I loved Amherst. It was awesome. I've heard from a few of the vendors that the right people were there, and they actually did great. They made money, people bought stuff, and it was very successful. So
Maybe I'll
that's my
find out
report.
Maybe I'll find out a report, see how Paul did too.
Yeah, you could ask somebody, but everybody that I talked to, the right people came, and they came with their wallets open, and they bought stuff. We bought stuff for the museum. So.
There's something I think called pent-up demand.
Yes.
That's where people have been stuck in their houses for 2 years because of COVID, and they're like, "Damn it, I want to get out and do something fun for a change," and that's what they did. Sounds like. Hopefully
I love
not.
the virtual railfan aspect of Amherst. I thought it was cool that people could take part that way. We're actually looking at doing that for the Rocky Mountain Train Show, which I'll talk about next month because then it'll be 2 weeks out from that.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, especially we can see how many times we found Michelle floating around on the.
Oh
on the
yeah, people
webcast.
were like, I found her, and they'd send me a picture on Messenger or something. It was really cute. I'm like, I saw you.
I think I found you 2 or 3 times at most.
It was funny. It was fun though, and that made it really fun. And then actually Rod that was on here asked if I could go wave at him, so I went to the Railfan booth, and they were actually showing another building, and they were in their cycle of cycling through, and they're like, "Oh no, we'll pull it back here," and they actually went and pulled their camera back so I could wave at Rod, which I thought was really sweet.
That's good.
So, yeah, it was fun.
So train shows. I'm going to a train show this coming weekend up in Madison for the Mad City show. I'll be up there all weekend doing publicity for the museum.
Nice.
And since you mentioned St. Louis, I think we'll be there as well.
Excellent.
I still got to hear back from from them to make sure if we are going to be going or if I'm just going to be going there with our club and then handing out brochures, magazines, etc. at the show.
Look, there was somebody near me. I'm sorry. This comment. That happens all the time, and I'm like, I'm sorry. My
Did you
picture
see
was,
that? Andrew was almost famous for a minute. He almost.
Oh no, he's the famous one. He would have been unlucky to me.
I know Andrew from Heath's channel. He's always on Heath, or I don't know. I haven't seen him actually lately, but I also haven't been on Heath's channel lately.
Well, Michelle met Heath at Amherst, right?
I did. I met Heath. I met a lot of people in person for the first time, and that was really fun.
But the real question, though, Michelle, is did Heath tell you that? Oh, actually, because I asked you if I could give him your number.
Uh-huh.
I was the middleman for that.
He helped me find
meeting.
Heath because there's no way of finding me at Amherst because I'm here one second and gone the next. And Brandon in chat, it was really cute. This gentleman comes up to me and he says, "Are you Michelle?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "My son said I needed to meet you." And I'm like, "Awesome, let's take a picture." And it was Brandon. He's in chat right now.
Oh, that's great.
Super sweet. I also got, some people knew me. Some people were sent to find me who didn't know me, like Brandon's dad. And then other people knew me as the Star Trek girl. I got that one a few times too from the Rapido video. They didn't know me from the museum or anything. They're like,
"Oh, that is funny." That is so funny. Who would think, right? But hey,
Yeah,
whatever.
it was fun. I'm glad Brandon's and his dad. It's all about having fun and just enjoying meeting people in person, and it was a lot of fun.
Sometimes it's hard to go to a show like that because people want to come up. Well, for me, I think because I've been on YouTube as long as I have, and
Everybody knows you.
right? I'm always the same guy. I mean, you know, Michelle, I'm the same guy in person as I am on here. There's no fake persona for the camera. Let's put it that way. So people do know me. I mean, they really do get an idea of who I am and what I'm like. But they come up and they're just like talking to me like, who are you? Because to me, it's just some random stranger. I don't know anything about this person walking up to me, but they're talking to me like they know me. Like, I'm sorry, do I know you? So it's always a little bit of a challenge. I mean, not, never being mean to anybody like that or anything like that, but just it's weird to have that happen. So probably like when I walked up to you in Utah, I'm like, oh, hi, Michelle. You're like, who's this idiot?
I had a funny thing happen at Amherst that just cracked me up because of this, like what you're saying. Usually what happens is modelers are shy. And so I'll see somebody kind of looking like, is that Michelle? Maybe that's her. And I can tell her just kind of like, maybe it's her. Should I say hi? So I usually just turn around and say, hi, I'm Michelle. Who are you? Right? Or I'll say hi, or I'll start a conversation like that. And I was at Amherst in the last building, and this man was kind of doing that. So I turned around and I said, hi. And he goes, are you Jean? And I said, no, I'm Michelle. And he's like, Michelle? And I said, yeah, like from maybe YouTube or the museum. And he's like, oh, you're not Jean. And he walks away.
What?
It was awesome. I just started cracking up. I'm like, that was the best humbling experience I could ever have. That was so perfect. That was awesome.
Well, I think we should we should rename you on the show as Gene.
It was so cute though. It was so funny. He was so disappointed.
That is so funny. Gene. Something similar.
Trevor's got a point. You need to wear your top secret disguise, Michelle, so that way people don't recognize you.
I don't know how I could get away with that, but I could try.
Something similar to that happened to me, Michelle. I was in Chama, right? Last August? Yeah, August, when just a couple days after I saw you, last time I saw you in person. And I was standing next to Gary, and we were talking to someone else, and then he was with someone, right? And he comes up and he says, oh, hey, I really like your YouTube channel. And I thought he was talking about me because people come up to me and say that. And I'm like, oh, thanks. And then he continued talking. He was talking to Gary. And I thought, oh, that is so excellent. I didn't have to deal with it that time. And I was so glad because it's like, and after he went away, I turned to Gary and I said, Gary, you just got fangirled. We have that joke. I thought that was so funny. But I felt, sorry.
No, I'm going to have to go because they're messaging me. They need a dispatcher. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Well, same bat time and same bat channel next month, I guess.
And next month's theme. I came up with a theme for it because it's my crazy brain. I was looking at my calendar and I'm like, oh, this is the day before St. Patrick's Day. And at the museum, the week of St. Patrick's Day, we always do BNSF days because I get to see a lot of Burlington Northern green. And so I think the theme will be green. And so if you have something green on your layout or that you model, or I mean, it could be even scenery, whatever's green in your world, I think our theme will be green.
So for me, it would be Chicago and Northwestern.
There you go. And I like Chicago and Northwestern. Yep. Yeah, so
I painted in green.
Bring a couple pictures next month. So and I might even find a photographer who's done a lot of green photography, and we'll see what we get.
Gee, I wonder who you would know that can do that.
I don't know, John Crisani.
Yeah,
right. Well, I guess then, Michelle. Well, actually, Dave, I'm going to let you go then, so that we can close the show out.
Bye, Dave.
Thanks for calling. It was good talking to you.
Yep. See you guys next month.
Yep. See ya. So actually, maybe what I'll do for that then is I won't have my green screen active so that I have the film strips behind me. I'll just have it be the green screen. And that'll be my way.
You can bring your green screen literally. That works.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. All right. Well, thank you, Michelle, again for doing the show.
Thanks for having me. I think it's fun.
right.
I always learn something.
Well, it's your show too. I say it all the time. So, it's also your show. So you're welcome for me being here and hosting it with you. Trying to think of what to say.
Okay.
But I
Well,
also,
thank you, viewers, for watching.
that's what I
Yeah.
was about to transition to thanking everybody who watched, and also to our chat moderators, because actually there was some times when the different Daves were posting links and stuff like that. And Jim's gone, but I do want to mention that again. A big thanks to Jim Providenza for being here today, because he's one of these guys that, if you're one of the co-authors of the book about operations, I feel really privileged to have access to someone like that who's willing
It was an
to
honor
share.
to meet him. Yeah.
Right? So, and anyway, so I think that's suffice to say that. Is there anything else you want to say before we go?
No, thank you, everybody. I had a good time. Fun show.
All right. Thanks, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.